I had just 14 years when my life turned upside down with a dry, cold sentence said by my father, "You're getting married." There was no explanation. There was no affection. It was simply thrown into the air, like someone commenting on the weather. "It's going to rain tomorrow." My mother stood beside him, but said nothing. Her eyes were glued to the floor, as if the world had collapsed inside her, and she no longer had the strength to react. My father then added, "You have been chosen." A woman from the neighboring town came to us. "The man is good, fair. He already has 3 wives. You will be his 4th. It is a blessing." I was paralyzed. How could this be called a blessing? And before I continue my story, I want to open my heart to you, who are listening now. This helps me feel that, even separated by distance, there is someone on the other side who is truly paying attention. So, if you can, share your impressions. Let's keep this conversation open, honest, and respectful, because that's how we grow, even in the midst of the most painful stories. At that moment, I could barely breathe. It was as if the air had been drained from the room. My stomach churned, my mind struggling to deny what my ears had just heard. 4th wife. But I didn't even truly understand what it meant to be a wife. I was still learning to braid my own hair. I still spent afternoons playing dolls with my sisters. I still dreamed of school, still imagined what my first love would be like. And suddenly I was told I should lie down next to a man old enough to be my father and call him husband. I tried to open my mouth to say something, anything, but my voice faded. I could only whisper, "Please, Daddy," before he cut me off with a glare and a raised hand. "There will be no shame in this house. This is your duty. It is lawful. It is tradition. The prophet did it. We follow his path." That night, I remember running to my room and locking the door with shaking hands. I threw myself onto the bed and buried my face in the pillow, trying to hold back the pain. But the tears came so hard I could barely breathe. I cried until my face burned, until the pillow was soaked, until my body had no more strength to fight. Everything inside me screamed. In those days, all I wanted was to disappear, vanish from the map. My entire body trembled, not only from fear of the man I would be handed over to, but also from dread of what might happen if I had the courage to say no. I knew too much. I had seen too much. I still remember my cousin Samira. She fell in love with a Christian boy and ran away with him. When they found her, they brought her back as if she were a lost object. After that, I never heard from her again. Not a trace, not a whisper. It was as if they had erased her existence. 2 weeks later, my wedding took place. There was no white dress, no flowers, no joy, only resignation. They draped a green and gold shawl over me, embroidered throughout, my hands covered in henna, and my face motionless. Inside, I trembled like a prisoner walking to her cell. The women around me were singing excitedly, as if there was something to celebrate. But all I could feel was the darkness tightening around my chest. Before we left for the Imam's house, I found myself in front of a mirror. The girl staring back at me was no longer me. Her eyes were dark, dull holes. Her smile was gone, ripped away by force. She looked empty. He was 48 years old. That was the first thing I noticed. Old enough to be my father. His beard was already graying, his hands were large and rough, and his eyes calm in a frightening way. There was no tenderness, no warmth. He welcomed me like one receiving another object for his collection. Useful, beautiful, but easily replaceable. The other wives barely looked up when I arrived. They led me straight to the smallest room in the house, along with a list of cold rules and daily chores. Don't speak, don't go out, don't exist unless he calls. The first night was the worst. I can't, and don't want to, go into details. I can only say that something inside me was broken forever. I spent hours awake, motionless, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was life, or if I was already dead. My body ached, but the pain in my soul was even greater. In the darkness, I whispered, "Ya Allah, If you love me, take me now while I sleep." But sleep did not come. Not that night, nor in the many that followed. Months passed, and I lived like a shadow in that house. I did what I was told. I cooked. I cleaned. I smiled when necessary. I lied with my eyes. I submitted without choice. When I went to the mosque with him, people looked at me with admiration. "Mashallah, what a pious Imam. What a beautiful wife." I wanted to scream. No one saw the marks hidden beneath my sleeves. No one noticed the emptiness in my chest. No one asked me anything. They only praised from afar that perfect facade that hid a hell. The same man who received sweet words in the mosque was the one who, behind closed doors, crushed me with shouts, insults, and razor-sharp accusations. Over time, my body learned to react before my mind even grasped the danger. All it took was for him to raise his voice or approach with heavy footsteps, and I'd cower. Still, I clung to the faith I'd been taught since childhood. I prayed more fervently. I asked for mercy, deliverance, a sign that God truly saw me. I began memorizing more surahs, fasting extra days, observing silence. I wanted to be the perfect wife, but the more I obeyed, the more distant peace seemed to become. It was like digging a hole with my bare hands, deeper and deeper. And at the bottom, there was no water, no light, only silence. Until, one seemingly ordinary day, something unexpected happened. I was cleaning my room when, tucked away among the worn wood of a shelf, I found a small notebook hidden. It was old, with yellowed pages and a loose cover. Dust covered it completely, as if no one had touched it for years. Curiosity got the better of me. I sat on the floor and began leafing through it. I thought it was the diary of one of the wives who came before me, but I soon realized it wasn't. They were handwritten passages from the Quran, yes, but alongside them were questions. Deep, disturbing, almost dangerous questions. Why is this verse so harsh? How can a God who claims to be loving allow young girls to marry older men? Would a merciful creator really want this? I froze. Those were precisely the doubts I'd been silently harboring inside. Questions I hadn't even dared to ask, much less say out loud. Reading those words was like hearing someone translate the scream I'd been stifling in my chest for so long. I never knew who wrote it, but I felt like that person understood me more than anyone else around me. I clutched the notebook to my chest as if it were sacred. That night, hidden under the covers, I grabbed the small flashlight I kept in the drawer and reread each line, one by one. On one page, I came across a verse I already knew by heart. The surah that says men are responsible for women, and that if they are disobedient, they can be corrected, even with violence. I'd heard this text dozens of times in class, repeated by scholars, imams, and teachers as part of the ideal family. But that night, something changed. For the first time, I looked at those words and thought, can this be fair? How can someone who presents themselves as fair and loving allow violence within a marriage? It was then that I understood why my husband never thought it was wrong to hit me. For him, it was allowed. I closed the notebook and stared at the ceiling, like so many other nights. Only this time I didn't cry. There was a strange silence inside me. Not peaceful, but not despair either. It was as if the shock had turned into anesthesia. The next morning, I realized something was different about me. When he asked me to make lunch, I obeyed, but each gesture was slow and distant. When he touched my shoulder, I flinched, as if an alarm had gone off inside me. And it was in that moment that I understood. Something inside me had broken. Or maybe it had finally awakened. From then on, I began leaving my room in the early hours of the morning, when everyone else was asleep. I walked barefoot, holding my breath to keep quiet. I went to the house's small library, a place forbidden to me, but I no longer cared. It was there, in that silent room, that I began to read. I began picking up books that were previously forbidden to me. Some were about religion, others about history, philosophy, and even science. It was like discovering a hidden world within that house. It was during one of those silent early mornings that I found something that would completely change my life. A Bible. It was hidden behind a pile of old papers, inside a plastic bag already worn with age. It was small, with thin pages, some torn. Someone had left it there. Maybe an ex-wife, maybe a secret visitor. I picked it up carefully, my heart racing, as if committing a crime. I opened it without expecting anything. But within the first few pages, I was captivated. I came across words that seemed written directly to me, like a balm on old wounds. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I read and reread this verse several times, as if I couldn't believe there was a God who said that. At that moment, I felt something I didn't recognize. Was it hope? I began to cry. But it wasn't the usual silent weeping. It was a deep, desperate cry, like that of someone finally found after being lost for so long. And there I asked myself, is this the God I've been searching for since I was a child? The God who listens to me when no one else does? I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. Just touching that Bible would be grounds for punishment, perhaps worse. But something inside me changed. I never prayed to Allah again. I began to pray silently, conversing with the God of those words that gave me rest. And my prayer was simple. If the Lord is real, if the Lord wrote this, if the Lord can set me free, then show me the way. The next day, something happened that may seem small, but to me was huge. For the first time, my husband let me go to the grocery store alone. One of the older wives was sick, and there was no one to shop. That walk through the streets, even watched by the eyes of my neighbors, was like breathing freedom. I felt like my feet were my own for the first time. And on that simple journey, I began to think, what if this is the chance I asked for? What if this is the beginning of the answer? On the way back, head down and bag in hand, I passed a bookstore tucked between two old buildings. Almost no one noticed it, but something in the window made me stop. There was a handwritten sign, "You are loved no matter who you are." Those words stuck with me, as if they had been written specifically for my life. My heart raced. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was speaking to me. Inside the store, a young woman was organizing books. When she saw me, she smiled so kindly that it felt like she knew me. "Regards," she said, her voice soft. I just shook my head and pulled the scarf tighter to hide my face. I couldn't answer. Fear still overwhelmed hope. But just as I was about to leave, she quietly approached and placed a small piece of paper in my hand. I waited until I got home to open it. And when I finally read it, a shiver ran through me. It read, "You have not been forgotten. There is freedom and truth." I held that note like a treasure. I carefully folded it and hid it in the same secret place where I already kept my Bible and notebook. I didn't understand everything that was happening. But one thing was certain. I was no longer completely alone. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of light in the dark tunnel I'd been living in. From that moment on, I began to live two lives. On the surface, I was still the Imam's fourth wife, obedient, silent, fulfilling all the chores, reciting the surahs, going to the mosque with the same expression as always. A performance so perfect that even I, at times, almost believed it. But inside, a new world was being born. A world where I could question, think, and feel without guilt. Every night when the house fell silent, I would take out my hidden Bible and read a few pages by the dim light of my flashlight. It was dangerous, risky, almost madness. But I couldn't stop. Those words didn't just calm me. They gave me identity. They made me feel alive, clean, worthy. For the first time, I didn't see myself as property. I saw myself as someone of value, as a daughter, as a person who could still be loved. There was one verse that hit me like silent thunder. "I have loved you with an everlasting love." I read it so many times that I ended up memorizing it. No human being had ever said anything like that to me. Not my father, not my husband, not even the texts I recited from the Quran. For me, Allah had always been distant, like an impersonal judge ready to punish me for the slightest mistake. But the voice in those pages was different. It was close. It was sure. It sounded like someone who knew me deeply and still wanted me. One of those nights, I had a dream I'll never forget. I was inside the mosque, sitting among several women dressed in black, all reciting verses in unison. The sound echoed loudly, suffocating. Suddenly, everything stopped. A man walked through the door, dressed in white. He said nothing. He walked toward me calmly. As he approached, he lifted my face with his fingertips and looked into my eyes. I didn't recognize that face, but his touch made the fear, pain, and shame disappear. Then he spoke, in a firm and tender voice. "You are free." I woke up gasping, covered in sweat, my heart racing, and even though I'd never seen him before, I knew who he was. It was Jesus. After that dream, a need grew within me. I needed to know more, but there was no one I could trust. No friend, no sister, no one. So I did the only thing I could. I grabbed an old cell phone, forgotten by one of my wives, and installed a Bible app. The device was slow, but it still worked. I hid it under the floorboards in my bedroom, right under my prayer rug. Whenever I had a moment alone, I would pull out my phone and read avidly. I also began secretly watching testimonies of former Muslims who had found Christ. Each story was different from mine, yet so similar. Some lived in hiding. Others had fled to other countries. Some had even been killed. These stories gave me courage, but they also reminded me of the price of freedom. And then, one silent night, I almost lost it all. I was sitting on the floor, phone in hand, reading the Gospel of John. The phrase flashed before me, "The truth will set you free." I was lost in those words, almost at peace, when I heard a creak at the door. My entire body froze. I looked up and saw one of the co-wives standing there, staring at me with wide eyes. I tried to hide my phone under the blanket, but it was too late. She didn't say anything. She just turned and left. My whole body started to shake. I knew what was coming. I felt like my life was hanging by a thread. That same night, my bedroom door was flung open. My husband stormed in, his cell phone in his hand. His eyes burned with hatred, his voice almost demonic. "You filthy, unfaithful woman! How dare you bring this filth into my house?" Before I could respond, the first blow hit my face. I fell to the ground, stunned. Soon came the second. I couldn't scream anymore. I just curled up, covering my head with my arms, as I had done so many times before. But that night was different. For the first time, I didn't cry out to Allah. I whispered with what little breath I had left. "Jesus, Lord Jesus, save me. Get me out of here." He dragged me to a small room at the back of the house and locked the door. It was a forgotten warehouse, windowless, stuffy, with the smell of rotting wood and mold clinging to my skin. There was no water, no food, only silence, broken by the creaking floorboards and my own thoughts. The darkness was so thick I could barely see my own hands. The days blurred together. Hunger and thirst made me dizzy. My mind wavered between memories and delusions. The pain was real, but the loneliness hurt even more. My lips cracked and my voice nearly gone. I murmured, "Jesus, if you are real, come now. I can't take it anymore." On the third night, when my body was barely responding, I had another dream. The same man dressed in white appeared before me. He shone as if made of light, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him was a crowd. Women with kind eyes, men with lined but smiling faces, children with outstretched arms, all dressed in white. They all looked at me as if they knew me, as if they had been waiting for me. The man approached, extended his hand and said in a soft, firm voice, "You are not alone." I woke up with tears in my eyes. But they weren't like before. They weren't tears of fear nor of abandonment. They were tears of something new, hope. The next morning, the door finally opened. A bright light flooded the room, searing my dark, accustomed eyes. I blinked several times until I could see. It wasn't my husband. It was the young woman from the bookstore. Her name was Miriam. She knelt beside me and whispered hurriedly, "We don't have much time. Come with me now." After that, my memory is a jumble of quick images. The sound of my heart beating louder than any other noise. My legs trembling, nearly knocking me over. The cold wind on my face for the first time in weeks. Miriam led me through alleys and streets I'd never seen before, until we arrived in a Christian neighborhood, far from the city where I was born and raised. Before us, an old building with dusty windows and an iron gate. A shelter. Inside, I met other women. Some had scars in their eyes like mine. Some were ex-Muslims. Others were Christians who risked their lives to welcome those fleeing in silence, like me. For the first time in my entire life, no one told me to shut up. No one judged me. They gave me a hot plate of food, clean clothes, a simple but soft bed. And, above all, they gave me back something I didn't even know I'd lost: my dignity. The first week in that shelter was a strange mix of relief and fear. At night, I still woke with a start, certain I would hear heavy footsteps approaching the door. During the day, I thought about my mother, her silent presence, her calloused hands, her voiceless obedience. I also thought about my sisters, still trapped in the same world I had left. Would they miss me? Would they look for me? These questions hammered at my mind. But whenever doubt tried to pull me back, I remembered what I had escaped. And then I understood. No matter how much it hurt, I couldn't go back. I began attending small Bible studies, always in secret. I sat in the back, quietly, just observing. At first, I didn't say anything. But inside, my heart burned with the questions I'd carried throughout my life. Why does God allow so much suffering? Am I now condemned for leaving Islam? Could Jesus really love someone like me? Among those people was a woman named Anna. She too had come from Islam. Her story was different from mine, but the pain was familiar. She didn't pretend to have all the answers, but when her eyes met mine, I felt seen, understood, safe. At one of the meetings, she read a passage that disarmed me. The story of the woman caught in adultery. The scene remained vivid in my mind. The religious leaders, full of self-righteousness, with stones in their hands, screams in their eyes. I saw myself in her, ashamed, guilty, defenseless in the face of seemingly endless judgments. But then Jesus stood up and said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." No one dared to cast. He looked at her and did not condemn her. He forgave her. At that moment, I cried in a way I can't describe. My whole body shook. It was as if someone had told me my life story without ever knowing me. I was that woman. I had been stoned by looks, words, silences. But Jesus lifted me up. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat for hours on the edge of my bed, staring into space, until I fell to my knees. There were no more masks, no more doubts, just me, broken, before a God who finally seemed to hear me. Between sobs, I whispered, "Jesus, I believe. I don't understand everything, but I know what I've found in you is real. Save me. Transform me. Make me a new person." It was as if a door had opened within me. The darkness that had enveloped me for so many years receded, and for the first time, light entered. A true peace, not the kind that feigns, but the kind that remains. The next morning, I told Anna everything. She hugged me tightly, as if she were my mother. We cried together, and then she said, "Now you are born again. You are no longer a slave. You are a daughter of God." That sentence pierced my heart like an arrow. Daughter. I had never really been a daughter. Not to my father. Not to the man who bought me as his wife. But now I was a daughter. And in that moment, for the first time, I believed it. About a week later, I was baptized in a small river on the outskirts of town. The place was simple, surrounded by trees and silence, as if nature itself were witnessing that moment. There weren't many of us, maybe 7 or 8. But the connection between us was deep, even without many words. The water was freezing, but the warmth of the sun on my skin brought balance. And in that dive, I let my old life sink and resurfaced as someone new. When I plunged into the waters of baptism, I felt as if I were being washed not only on the outside, but also on the inside, as if centuries of silence, shame, and fear were being washed away. As I emerged, my eyes turned to the sky, and for the first time in years, I truly smiled, with a lightness in my heart. It was like breathing for the first time. I was free, but I soon discovered that freedom isn't instantaneous. It's not simply walking through a door and never looking back. Even after baptism, I still carried invisible chains tied to the darkest corners of my mind. Chains forged by years of abuse, rigid doctrines, fear, and control. All I had to do was close my eyes, and I could hear my father's voice echoing, telling me what a disgrace I was. I could still see the Imam's cold face, his stony eyes, repeating that Allah had given me to him as a gift, as if I were just an object, a debt repaid with flesh and bones. And that's when I understood. Trauma doesn't just disappear. It stays. It whispers through the long nights, tries to trap the soul in the past. But now I had something I'd never had before. Or rather, somebody. I had a constant light. I had Jesus. At the shelter, they gave me a new name, Amina. Interestingly, it was the same one I'd had since birth. But this time, it didn't come from an official document or the mouth of an overbearing father. It came from me. For the first time, my name belonged to me. It didn't mean daughter of or wife of, much less property of. It was simply mine. Step by step, I began to rebuild my life. I opened my first bank account, something that had previously seemed impossible. I got a part-time job cleaning houses, a simple but honest job. For the first time, I was earning through the sweat of my brow, not through the exploitation of my body. On Fridays, while Muslims went to the mosque for Jummah prayer, I sat alone, my Bible open to the Psalms. That's when David became my friend, a man who had also fled, who had also been betrayed, who also cried out for help with a broken soul. His cries became mine. "How long, Lord?" And yet he called God his refuge. That struck me deeply. In Islam, my prayers were memorized, repeated mechanically, as if God could only hear me if I got every word right. Not anymore. Now I spoke from the heart, without formality, without fear. I cried, and he heard me. I spoke, and he responded with peace. Not a feigned peace, not an imposed peace. It was a living, real peace. My relationship with Jesus grew in silence. There were no daily miracles. I didn't hear voices from heaven or see angels entering my room. But there was peace. A peace that remained even when nightmares haunted me. Even as the memory of captivity tightened my chest, something was different. I was being healed. Not all at once, but little by little, step by step. Then one night I received a message on social media. It was from my younger sister. She had found my profile and recognized me, even with my new name. The message was short, but it fell on me like a heavy stone. "Why did you leave us? Why did you abandon Islam? Father is sick because of you." I stood there, staring at the words on the screen. My hands were shaking. A part of me wanted to respond, to explain everything. I wanted to tell my sister that I hadn't run away out of selfishness, but for survival. But how can I explain this to someone who still lives within the same fear I managed to escape? How can I say that I didn't abandon her out of hatred, but because I wanted to live? At that moment, I didn't respond. I closed my phone, knelt down and prayed, "Jesus, if you want me to speak, give me words. But if silence is safer, give me the strength to wait." A few days later, something unexpected happened. My story spread around the world. It wasn't planned. One of the women at the shelter, a missionary who had become my friend, asked if I would be willing to record my testimony. without showing my face, without saying my name, just my voice. I hesitated. I thought about it for a long time, but in the end, I accepted. We recorded in a quiet room with an old microphone. I told everything, from the moment my father announced I would be his fourth wife to the day I emerged from the baptismal waters. She posted the audio on a Christian YouTube channel that shared stories of ex-Muslims. I wasn't expecting anything, but soon the message spread. Thousands of views, comments of all kinds. Some called me brave, others a liar and a heretic. But what really struck me were the private messages. People from places like Iran, Afghanistan, Somalia, young girls, women forced into marriage, young men full of hidden doubts. They all said the same thing. Your story gave me hope. Messages started coming in from girls in Pakistan, Egypt, Iran, girls like me, trapped in silent prisons. One of them wrote, "I'm 15 years old and engaged to a man over 40. After hearing your story, I realized I'm not crazy. Thank you for speaking up." Another said, "I've also started reading the Bible in secret. Please pray for me. I'm scared, but also hopeful." Each message was like a blade piercing my heart, and, at the same time, like a seed being planted within me. I cried with each one because I saw myself in them, in the fears, in the doubts, but also in the courage hidden behind the silence. It was then that I realized something profound. My pain had not been in vain. It had become a beacon. With this in mind, I began volunteering at a Christian ministry that rescued women who were victims of religious abuse. We helped smuggle Bibles, organized escape routes, connected girls to safe shelters, and in more urgent cases, even funded emergency transport to protect them. One of the girls I closely followed was only 13 years old. Her own father had offered her as a gift to a tribal leader in exchange for land. When she managed to escape, her family spread her photos on social media, calling her an apostate, impure, and a disgrace. But she survived. We were able to get her to a safe haven in Jordan. I wrote to her every week, always using a false name. In one of the letters, I left these words: "Don't let their hate erase who you are. You are not trash. You are not a curse. You are deeply loved." And so, I began to dream again. Only this time, they weren't dreams that came only when I slept. They were conscious visions of a real, concrete future. I saw myself going back to school, maybe psychology, maybe theology, and opening a shelter for girls like me. Girls sold before they even understood what it meant to have a choice. I dreamed of a place where they could eat in peace, sleep without fear, and know a God who loved them. But dreaming had a high price. My name began to appear on Muslim forums, accompanied by absurd theories. They said I was receiving money from missionaries to denigrate Islam, that I was a woman without honor, a rebel, a public disgrace. Some claimed I hated the hijab, that I hated my culture. Sometimes these lies made me furious. Other times they just saddened me, because I understood where they were coming from. I'd been on that side. I, too, once believed that anyone who left Islam was doomed, that Christians were deluded fools, that their freedom was false. And now, ironically, I was one of those people. And it was only then that I discovered what it truly meant to live. Because of the threats, I had to move again to another city. Those were difficult weeks, nights of uncertainty. But unlike before, I no longer fled out of fear. I walked with determination. I was no longer just a survivor trying to escape. I was the king's daughter, sent with a purpose. The last dream I had about Jesus was the most memorable of all. I stood before a huge gate. Behind me, nothing but desert, dry, empty, silent. In front of me, a vibrant garden, teeming with life, with tall trees, colorful flowers, and flowing water. The man dressed in white stood there beside the gate. He said nothing. He just looked at me tenderly and pushed the gate open gently, reverently. As I walked through, I felt a warmth fill my body. Then, He looked at me with eyes that seemed to contain the entire universe and whispered, "Very good." I woke up crying, but it wasn't pain. It was gratitude. I knew with every fiber of my being that whatever path lay ahead, I wouldn't be alone. I had found true freedom. Now it was time to help others find it too. Time passed, the seasons changed, and so did I. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw the girl with the dull eyes and broken soul. My posture had changed. My shoulders no longer held shame. My words came out firmly. It was strange to learn to speak again after so long of hearing only orders and threats. But I was learning. Eventually, I was invited to work full-time at a Christian women's shelter. There, my role went beyond serving coffee or making beds. I started listening to stories. I began counseling young people. I gave talks to small groups, girls who had fled forced marriages, girls scarred by violence, girls with the same questions I once had. I didn't have a college degree, but I had scars, and somehow they became my credentials. Because when I said, "I understand you," the girls knew it was true. I will never forget a young woman who forever marked my heart. Her name was Zara. She was only 16, but her eyes held a much older age, a painful maturity that only those who have suffered greatly know. Zara had run away from home after being brutally beaten by her own brother because she refused to wear the veil. When she arrived at the shelter, she still had purple bruises on her arms and fresh scars that betrayed her pain. For 2 whole weeks, she didn't utter a single word. Silence was her only way to protect herself in this frightening new world. One day, I decided to sit next to her. I didn't know exactly what to say, but I felt the need to break through that invisible barrier. I took off a necklace I kept around my neck, a small crucifix I'd received as a gift from Anna, the woman who baptized me. I no longer wore it, but in that moment, it felt right to give it to Zara. I placed the crucifix in her hands. She held it gently, looking at the cross with a mixture of curiosity and pain. Then, in the quietest voice I'd ever heard, she asked, "Does he love me, even though I was born Muslim?" I swallowed hard, feeling a lump in my throat, and I answered with all the certainty that faith in Christ had given me. "Yes, he loves you." And that's exactly why he came to us. That night, Zara cried in my arms, just as I had cried in Miriam's arms when I was rescued. It was at that moment that I understood. My healing wasn't just for me. It was also for all those who were still broken, wounded, waiting for someone to say, "You are not alone." But the journey wasn't made only of light. The pain also returned to haunt me. One day I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a sheet of paper printed with cold, cutting words. "You are a cursed apostate. The punishment for Ridda is death." Along with it was a blurry photo of me, taken by a street camera. Someone was watching me. Someone had found me again. I took it to the authorities, but deep down I knew it wouldn't do much good. There's no legal protection against religious hatred, the kind that hides behind spiritual interpretations and justifications. That night, alone, I opened my Bible for strength. I found a verse I had long ago underlined, but never understood so deeply. "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." I held those words like an invisible shield. Shortly thereafter, I received an invitation that kept me awake at night, to share my testimony at a Christian women's conference. I would have to stand on a stage and speak in front of hundreds of people. The thought terrified me. What if they judge me? What if I can't hold back the tears? What if the questions are too much for me? But the organizer looked me straight in the eye and said, "Amina, there are women in this room who need to hear your voice, even if it shakes." I took a deep breath and accepted. That night, under the bright lights of the auditorium, my heart beat so loudly it seemed to echo through the microphone. I shared everything. The forced marriage, the dark nights in the closed room, the dream about the man dressed in white. And when I pronounced the name of Jesus, a deep silence took over the place. When I finished, I looked up and saw women standing, Some were crying. Others raised their hands in worship. Many came closer afterward, hugging me and whispering, "Thanks." It was an overwhelming moment of beauty and liberation. I no longer needed to hide behind pseudonyms or blurry videos. I was Amina. Yes, I had been abused, silenced, beaten. But now I was standing, unashamed, unafraid. Shortly thereafter, I was invited to join a network of ex-Muslims who had found Jesus. It was a quiet but close-knit group where we exchanged resources, offered counseling to those still trapped in the system, and organized safe houses in several cities. Many of us still lived anonymously, using nicknames and changing phone numbers regularly. But within that secret family, there was something that united us more than blood ties. We were bound by the pursuit of true freedom. I still needed to tread carefully. It wasn't as if the danger had simply disappeared from my life. Not every church was prepared to welcome someone like me. Some leaders were afraid of what my testimony might provoke, wary of controversy. Others simply didn't understand the kind of threat I faced daily, the constant fear, the watchful eye that seemed to follow me even when no one was around. But thank God, there were always those who, with a welcoming smile and open arms, would say to me softly, "This is your home." Still, some nights, the longing would overwhelm me. I missed the sound of the call to prayer echoing through the silent dawn, the smell of the cardamom tea my mother so carefully prepared, the long, colorful robes we wore at Eid celebrations. There was beauty in that culture, moments of tenderness and tradition that I couldn't simply erase from my memory. Not everything had been shadow or fear, but soon my mind would bring me back to the price I paid, the imposed silence, the ingrained shame, the constant fear of being punished just for daring to think differently. And then I remembered. Jesus never asked me to renounce my identity or erase my roots. He simply gave me a new heart, one capable of loving, of forgiving, of finding hope where before there was only despair. This transformation changed everything. With her, my dreams began to grow. I began to imagine possibilities that previously seemed unattainable. What if I wrote a book? What if my story could reach girls in faraway places, places I could never visit in person? With slow steps and intense emotion, I began to write. Each word forced me to revisit open wounds, but it also brought back moments of healing. It was painful, but also sacred. I knew the threats would never completely cease. There would always be those who called me a traitor, a renegade. But something inside me was steadfast. I had known the truth, and that truth changed everything. The last time I saw my father was in a video sent from far away, from another country. He was sitting in a mosque, surrounded by men, his voice already weak but still carrying authority. He was talking about apostasy. His words cut deep within me. No daughter of mine will betray Islam. If she does, as far as I'm concerned, she's already dead. At that moment, I realized there would never be reconciliation, unless he changed, unless God touched him the way he touched me. But curiously, I didn't feel anger. I felt sadness. A deep sadness. Yes, but not the suffocating despair that once consumed me. For the first time, I was at peace with human rejection, because I understood that by being rejected by them, I was being welcomed by God. I had found something greater than lineage or tradition. I had found the truth that set me free. One night, in a small church that met in secret, we celebrated communion. I held a piece of bread in my hands, and my mind wandered. I remembered all those years I fasted during Ramadan, silently hoping that Allah would notice my sacrifice. I also remembered the times I ate in secret after running away, tormented by the fear of hell simply for breaking the rules. And yet, there I was, free to eat, free to remember, free to belong. As I approached the cup, I murmured in my heart, "Thank you, Jesus. I am yours." That same week, a young woman named Helena was baptized. She was 17 and visibly trembling as she stepped into the cold river waters. I held her hand gently. With doubt in her eyes, she asked me, "Will it hurt?" I smiled, remembering my own journey, and replied with conviction, "No, this is healing." When Helena emerged from the water, tears streamed down her face. I couldn't hold back my own. It was like seeing my own story repeat itself, only now in a different heart, with the same strength and the same hope. After the celebration, Helena hugged me tightly and whispered, "You were the reason I had the courage. I saw your video. I thought, if she could survive, maybe I can too." Those words sank deep within me. I never imagined my wounds could become inspiration. For years, I saw myself as weak, damaged, even cursed. But that night, I understood. My scars were living testaments to resilience. Later, I sat alone by the lake where we had performed the baptism. The moon shone overhead, and a gentle breeze touched the surface of the calm water. And in that silence, I finally felt the peace I had been searching for. I remembered the first time I tried to pray to Jesus. I was trapped in that dark room, my face marred with bruises, and my voice was so weak I could barely whisper his name. Every word seemed choked by the fear and pain I carried. But now, years later, I could speak to him out loud, without fear, without shame, with all the sincerity of my heart. Jesus, if it weren't for you, I would still be in that cage, lost in silence and despair. Thank you for finding me, for loving me before I even knew how to love you. Use me. Send me. I am yours. And in that profound silence, I felt that overwhelming peace again. It wasn't just a fleeting relief for my emotions. It was a firm anchor holding my soul amidst life's storms. A peace I had never known before. Months later, I took an important step. I legally changed my name. Today, my documents bear the name Amina Grace. It's not just a pretty name. It's the truth that transformed my identity. It's the symbol of the new life I've found. I currently work for an international network that supports ex-Muslims, offering safety, counseling, and spiritual empowerment. I travel to speak at churches, schools, and women's shelters. Wherever there is someone who needs to hear that there is hope after fear, that there is life after darkness, there I am to share it. So far, I've helped over 30 women escape situations of abuse and danger. Some now live in Canada, others in Europe. We stay in touch, praying together via video calls, celebrating birthdays, achievements, and faith milestones. And every time one of these women smiles freely, I remember, Jesus not only freed me, he made me part of their freedom too. Every year, on the day of my baptism, I choose to fast. Not because anyone forces me to, but as a gesture of deep gratitude. I spend the entire day alone with Jesus, thanking him for rescuing that girl no one saw. That girl who was sold before she even had the chance to dream. That girl who found freedom when it seemed like all hope was gone. Of course, there are still difficult days. The suffering doesn't disappear overnight. This isn't a sign of weakness, it's just the reminder that the wounds existed. Sometimes, at night, my mind wanders back to that somber wedding. I remember the cold hands signing the papers, the applause of the guests as I hid my tears. I also remember the bloodstains displayed as trophies, as if my pain were a source of honor for others. But today I decided to reframe that memory. Not to harbor sadness, but to remember that on that day my body was forcibly taken. But my soul began to cry out for help, and Jesus heard me. My testimony is not about revenge. It's not about erasing the past. It's about redemption. It's about a Savior who enters the dark rooms of shame and pain and declares, "You are not what they said you were. You are mine." And if you're listening to my story right now and you feel fear, silence, or confusion, I want you to know one thing. You are not alone. You have not been forgotten. You are not as lost as you think. I am living proof that there is hope. My name is Amina Grace. I was once a prisoner of tradition, guilt, and fear. But today, I am free. Because where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And this freedom can be yours too.